All right, hey everybody, welcome to this week's business training. My name is Charles Gaudet with my man Zach Burks.
Mate,
What's up, buddy?
not much.
I just showed off my shirt earlier. There we go. We'll show it off again. So together we're better, right, brother? Together we're
Yep.
better. So hey, I know we've got only a limited time today, and I want to go over um, today's main topic, which is really about something that a lot of people don't consider when they think about doubling their sales. There's really kind of two main ways that you're going to double your sales. Option number one is that you're going to have to double your conversion rate, or option number two is that you do what, Zach?
You increase your activity.
Increase your activity, right? And this is where most people actually they don't really consider the activity that much. So I want to talk to you about activity, how that works within our company, when we're working with our clients, the impact that has on their business and so forth. And so part of the reason why this is important, right, is that there are certain things that we can control. For example, we all want the bigger numbers, right? But I can't force you, no matter how good I am at sales, I can't actually force you to open up your wallet and hand over. Hopefully that's fixed. I can't control you actually picking up the phone. But what I can control actually is my activity. I can control how many dials I have during the day. So, Zach, I know that this is kind of one element of our business that you really have taken it upon yourself to truly master. So why don't you kind of walk us through what you found as far as activity, how you're tracking it, monitoring it, and the impact that that's made just on your own performance.
Yeah, that's a good question. So to start with, as I think a lot of people know, we are Sandler sales trained and Sandler advocates and proponents, and so that was one of the things I learned early on in going through that training. It was that oftentimes people say, well, I need to make $10,000. I got to make $2,000. I got to get this. I got to get that. And like I just didn't convert that many, and the stress kind of builds, and it has kind of a compound effect. If you look at it as, I can't control how you show up, Charlie, but I can control how I show up, and I can control how many activities I do per day. So, starting with, and that just kind of changed my mindset, because I was always, goal driven, and it's not saying that you shouldn't be goal driven, but rather than looking at that, you want to start with kind of the end in mind and kind of reverse engineer from there. So if I know that I need to have, and I'm just kind of throwing out random numbers, 11 calls before I can sell $100,000, something, like that, right? Just what do I need to do to get to that, how can I break that down day by day to ultimately hit that goal? And I can control that, right? I can control if I make 3 dials today, 2 emails tomorrow, 1 LinkedIn request, Friday, something like that, versus, well, I just got to do this. And it's not really, first of all, it's not strategic. There's no way to track and measure, just like, well, I got to do it. Right. The numbers. And then lastly, it changes your mindset. You go from like kind of the scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset, knowing that if I hit my numbers, the money will come. And sure as my stepdad would say, sure as the sun will rise, they will come if you hit your numbers and you have your process in place.
We actually have a mutual friend of ours who used to work on our sales team, and he used to say in his company, what they would do before he came to work with us is the number one thing that they looked at is your activity goals. And so he'd give himself a point. A phone call would be 1 point. If he actually got somebody on the phone, maybe that counted as 2 points. a sale might be 5 points. And that was the way that he measured his activity. An email might be 1 point. It'd say, you know what, no matter what happens today, come hell or high water, I need to have like 200 points today. And that helped him because one of the top salespeople in his company. And we do things a little bit different, but Zach, I'll let you dive into that a little more.
Yeah, so there's a couple things on that, right? And I think that's important. And you and I do this. We have that kind of that point thing. At least in my cold outreach, I know that I need to hit this, and I'm also accountable to you. And I'm kind of gaming it. So at the end of the day, if it's like 3:30, and I'm like, gosh, it's just been a crazy day. I've done like 17 different things, not including like taking my dog to the vet. Everything else in life. But I know I have to do 10. Cold emails today. So I sit down and I make sure I get it done because my day isn't over until I get that done. And Sandler, the guy who started the whole thing, would say like, because it is kind of a compound effect. If you have a diary or a journal and you're logging all of your information, day 1, day 2, day 3, you're going to have these, moments where, let's say you're on the phone and people are saying no. So your attitude is going to be down in the dumps, right? It's going to be a 0 or a 1, but you start hitting that activity, you're up in the 9 and the 10. So 0 to, 1 to 10 scale, right? And if you're getting denied, you're not hitting your goals, you're not doing this, whatever, you're probably down as a 1 or 2 in terms of attitude. But the more you start to do it, you're kind of like farming in a sense that, it starts to pay off in the long run. So then day 14, your activity is up there, but now your behavior is, your attitude is up there as well, because now you're starting to close deals, and all of everything that you're doing is starting to come into play. And then the other thing I see a lot with salespeople and just, business owners, right? We do, and we know this with agencies, really, that like, this happens a lot. I'll schedule and set, whatever, however many appointments, and maybe I close 2 new deals. Well, that's fantastic. And then I let off, right? I just stopped doing, my activity. And then 2 months from now, when the project is over, crap, I didn't do any activity. I've lost all momentum. Now it's got to go back to the drawing board and try to do it. So this is a good way to not only track that, but maintain that you're on top of your game. You're going to have opportunities coming in. You can ramp it down, of course, if you're too busy, but you always want to have that activity goals and make sure you're doing that to get to where you need to get to.
So if we look at this now from, the business owner standpoint, and I know that, many of us wear multiple hats. So many times a business owner will also be the one who is doing the selling, or, maybe you do have a sales team. And so what we're really doing is now from the business owner perspective, we're managing through the metrics. So if you compartmentalize every stage of your sales process, right? So if we start at the end and there's a specific number that we need to hit, and, say you want to hit 100,000 a month, whatever that might be, per salesperson, there needs to be a conversion rate there, right? So what is that conversion rate? What does that need to be? Say, well, on cold leads, a conversion rate, we're probably only doing maybe about, 28%. So now you say, okay, then how many calls do I need to have? Actual sales calls, closing calls do I need to have in order to get to that 100,000? So 28%, you reverse engineer. So you're going to come up with one number. You're going to say, okay, so I have to get, X amount of calls there. Now, in order for me to get those sales calls, right, how many pre-qualifying calls do I need to get? And so you take one step back, and, in our business, we have what our goal is, right, per salesperson. We have our full-on strategy sessions, which last about an hour. And before that, we have our 15-minute calls. And so we say, okay, so in order to get to this many strategy sessions, how many 15-minute calls do we need to have? And so we have a certain number. How many 15-minute calls do we need to have? And then we go, okay, well, how do I get this amount of 15-minute calls? Let's say you want to have, 115-minute calls in a week, right? What activity needs to happen in order to get those 15-minute calls? That means I got to send how many emails? That means I have to make how many phone calls?
Maybe you're sending something in the mail. The means is as important as long as you know what you need to do to generate those appointments, right? So for some people, maybe it's inbound. Maybe you're going to have those people coming through the door. maybe you're doing consultations or, something of that nature. You need to know your metrics, as you're saying. And the other thing I want to point out, because I get this, if as a business owner, it's easy to get caught up in the busy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I've been there, you've been there, we all know this. And it's easy to kind of maybe put this off. But if you're tracking your activity, it feels less like you're like a spammy salesperson. And that if I know from me, if I show up and genuinely try to help and provide value and just hit those numbers, everything will shake out, right? Like I know in the end, I will convert, I will make money, and I will help a lot of people if I hit those goals. So it's good for me because I have what I think a lot of people have is I was not like a natural salesperson. I've yet to meet anyone who's kind of like that. I mean, there's a handful, right? But I was never like, I always had what they call as cold call reluctance, right? I didn't want to call people and I didn't want to reach out and I didn't want to do these things because I was kind of like nervous. I was coming off as spammy or salesy or people were going to tell me no. But the more I started shifting it towards my activity, it's just got to hit these numbers. And the less I started focusing on the no or like, what would happen, my results went way up for one, and two, like it feels way different. I don't feel that like dread of like, oh, I got to do this. I have to call, whatever. Now I just, nope, I got to do my numbers. And it's as simple as that. Some days I can get them done before 10 a.m. Right. So then it's like, all right, got the rest of the day to focus on the business or having these calls versus, whatever.
And I think that one of the greatest things about having an activity goal is that you can actually control the activity goal. It feels a lot more powerful when you can control the activity. You know that, okay, it's up to me. If I want to send 100 emails today, I can send 100 emails. I can't promise you that I'm going to convert, 1, 2, 3 sales today. I can't promise that. And that can be somewhat defeating for a sales team when they're like, come on, man. No, you got to drive a sale today. You got to drive a sale today, especially as a manager. You got to hit a sale today. You got to hit a sale this week. You got to whatever. See, but your sales team can't control that. You can look at their metrics and see where you can improve and their conversion numbers and whatnot. But what they can actually control is their numbers. And so when you're looking at your sales team and you say, you know what, here's your mark. I want you to make, 86 phone calls today. I want you to do that. That might be a lot, right? But I want you to, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. It's a lot easier. And when you control the activity, it helps to boost morale. They're going to get more at-bats. So by default, they're going to improve by at-bats, meaning, that's going to be more times when they're going to get on the phone and have their sales message.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I was glossing over that, but the conversation to me, for us, if let's say I'm in this situation and you're like, look, dude, did you hit your mark? Did you do your activities? It's pretty, yes or no, right? I can't say, well, they didn't, the people I talked to just weren't interested. They didn't like it. That's kind of where this, bad culture can be built because, well, they're just not interested. Okay, that's fine. I don't want to hear the excuses. Yeah. But if it's activity driven, did you do your 20 calls or whatever it may be? It's either yes or no. And if I'm not hitting that, then I know the onus is on me. I can't blame you or anyone else for that matter, because I gotta hold my end of the deal. So I think it becomes a different conversation instead of like, oh, did you close this amount of deals? You're like, hey, did you hit your activities? Yes or no?
Right. A lot of big companies will have quotas, right? Let's say your quota at the end of the month is $100,000. And so the manager, according to the quota, did you hit your quota? If you said no, then it's like, come on, why didn't you hit your quota? But if they were really a strategic manager, they would say, okay, what were your activity numbers? So you didn't hit your quota. That may or may not be your fault. Let's back up a little bit. Is that Janie?
Yep. Sorry.
She has input too, So, then you back up and you go, okay, so you didn't hit your quota. You didn't hit your 100,000. Let's look at your activity. Did you hit those activity metrics that as a manager, hopefully you set up ahead of time? And if they didn't hit the activity metrics, then yeah, they weren't going to hit their $100,000. And that becomes a bigger issue because it's like, no, we committed that you were going to hit these metrics, these activity metrics, things you can control. You didn't hit quota and you didn't hit your activity. Now we've got to deal with this. You following me?
Yeah. Sorry, trying to hush Janie up over here. Yeah. So last training or the training before that, we talked about the prospecting plan. The last one, I think we went over the discovery call, or maybe that was the one before that. And then, we typically get into a deeper strategy session to kind of hopefully provide value. Because I think I say this, but I mean it. At the end of the call, ideally, you're left with clarity, and you're like, "That's good, but we're going to leave," or "That's good. How can we work together?" So we've kind of covered those aspects, and now we're getting into activity. So I know, looking at our 7-step prospecting plan, I want to do X amount of cold emails a day. I want to do follow-ups, LinkedIn connection requests, and then mail. I've been doing mail. And so I have numbers that I want to hit. And I bring this up because there's another thing that we didn't really touch on that I hear pretty often with a lot of, business owners, is that I know I'm busy, but at the end of the day, I just don't feel like I made an impact.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like, well, I was busy, but what the heck did I do?
Yeah.
And I know that one well, because when I was running my last business, I felt like I would just be so busy, and I'd get home and lay in bed, be like, did I actually do anything today? Did I actually help the business move forward? I don't know. I was just busy. But now, if I hit my goals and my numbers, it's like, okay, I know that I did what I had to do to kind of carry my end of the deal on this team. So I think that's important to point out. It not only, like, you feel like you're doing more impactful work by having these activity goals.
Well, we've actually have a number of agencies that we started working with. And the funny thing is like most companies, they built their business using, one or two sources of revenue, profit centers. It's either going to be referrals or it's going to be like SEO, right? And so the problem is when you're exclusively dependent on referrals or SEO, when you don't have deals coming in the door, you're literally sitting on your asses waiting for something to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the early steps that we take as coaches and consultants and working with business owners is to say, okay, well, let's start looking at setting a minimum activity goal, rather than you just sitting there waiting for something to happen, because we can't control how many of our clients are going to refer business to us. We can't control how many clients are going to come from SEO. Let's start being a little bit more proactive. And whether, again, it's them or their sales team, whatnot, let's start minimum activity goals. And so then when we start having these outbound activities and they're being held accountable to reaching a certain level of activity, they start to see some growth, which is super exciting. And then when they start to see some growth and super exciting and everybody's high-fiving and chest bumping and the whole deal, now it's like, okay, now how do we get over to that next level, right? And so now as we compartmentalize it, we could say, okay, maybe it's improving our conversion rate, or maybe the conversion rate is good enough and that's not it. Maybe it's improving the conversion rate between the 15-minute call and the hour-long call, the strategy session. Or maybe it's a matter of saying, how do I get more people to show up to these calls because they're not showing up? Or maybe it's going all the way back to the activity. So what would the impact be in your business if we could just sneak in maybe 5 more calls a day? That's 25 more calls a week. If we just did that, what would the impact be to your bottom line? And sometimes such as a little tweak like that, and they're realizing that, wow, man, that one little tweak could add a 10% increase to our bottom line per month, which doesn't sound like a lot. But what's 10 times 12?
120.
Right. A 10% increase doesn't sound like a lot, but you do that 12 months out of the year, it's 100% increase, right? 120% increase. You do it 5%, it's a 60% increase, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's much easier when you break it down to look for ways in which you can make incremental improvements.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we often talk about that, with the optimization and just kind of improving what you're already doing. So either people are kind of waiting, as you said, or they're already doing this. So it's like making those fine-tuned tweaks, if you will, to measure and track activity, measure and track conversions, per step, breaking it down or chunking it down to individual things and improving there. I mean, that's a totally another topic, but I think the mindset applies to this as well. As you're tracking activity, you're becoming more optimized and, more streamlined and ultimately getting better results for what you're doing.
And, today we were talking really about sales, but if we look at it now from just being a good entrepreneur, being a good business owner, and you ask yourself, what needs to happen every day or what needs to happen every week on a consistent basis that's going to help take my business to the next level, you're going to find there are going to be certain activities. Maybe it's, conversations you're having with a leadership team. Maybe it's content that you're pushing out the door, whatever that might be. That becomes your activity. And if you look at all the influencers inside of your company, all the profit centers inside your company, and you govern by activities that they can actually control, you're going to find that your results improve. And, inside of our company, we hold each other accountable. And so, Zach may hold me accountable. Several of you have been on our email list for a little while. You may have noticed that last Tuesday, I think it was, you received an email late at night, right? And it's because part of that activity was, I have to send an email and reach a certain goal. And so knowing that Zach was going to hold me accountable, and he reminded me several times throughout the day, like, hey, Charlie, don't forget you got this activity goal, because I had a lot going on, but I still hit it, and I think that's the most important thing. This way you're not sitting there wondering when you get up in the morning, what am I going to do today? And you get so busy kind of putting out fires, working through your to-do list and so forth. I see Krish is here. Glad to see you, Krish. One of the things that, he and I have talked about in quite depth is, the intentionality. That's what activity does. Activity makes you intentional. And that's the difference between being intentional and then being ad hoc. When you're ad hoc, you get up and you're like, all right, I'm just going to work my butt off. I'm going to do as much as I can and work my butt off. And the little things happen throughout the day, and, you do them. And at the end of the day, you're like, man, I put in a 10-hour day and I feel like I got nothing done, to what Zach talked about earlier. But then when you're intentional and you have those really specific activity goals that you need to set, what happens is, even if you end up only working a 6 or 7 or an 8-hour day, you hit your goals. And at the end of the day, you're like, boom, I got it done. I set out to get done what I wanted to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start to build that momentum. So just real quick, we've talked for about 25 minutes. Are there any questions? I think we've kind of just gone through activity, what it means, how to track that, how to build that into your business. But maybe there are some more specific questions. Anybody out there have any questions for us?
If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat box.
Chat box.
I think let me go check on live. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. It's, I don't know how to tell what's going on live, but so yeah, if you post something live, I'll have to answer it once we get on Facebook. But if you do have questions, throw them here. If you've never made activities, how do you start? Great question. All right, Zach, I'm going to let you answer that. If you've never made activities, how do you start?
Yeah, I think you got to start with the end in mind. So if I want to set, or if I want to make one sale, and I know that typically, however, and maybe you don't know this, and maybe you need to go back and start to look into the analytics, but knowing, how many opportunities it takes to get from one stage to the next, and break it down into a process or a sales process or a sequence, then you can become more clear about how many activities you need to make for that first step. So, for example, let's say I'm selling, I need to make a $20,000 deal. And we have a sales process in which we do a quick qualifying call. That's 15 to 20 minutes, a discovery call. And then we do an hour-long, deep dive, and then maybe a 30-minute call after that. In order to get to that 15-minute, step, I know that for every, 20 emails I send, one person says, yes, I'm interested, right? Like I have a 20% response rate or something. I don't know. So let's say that I know then that, okay, for every 20, I'm going to get one yes. And for every one yes, I guess I don't really know the numbers, how many of those will actually move to the next step. But then I start to break it down and know, each step, how many I need to have. But usually start with the end in mind and then go to the very beginning and say, well, I need to get, 20 emails out today. That's step one. And then tomorrow, maybe it's 20 follow-ups, and then, so on and so on. Does that answer your question? I felt like I just kind of rambled and went in circles. Charlie, what would you add?
Yeah. Well, I think you're pretty spot on. Activities are what it is that you can control. And I do like what you said about you start with the end in mind and you reverse engineer to say, okay, if I get this stuff done, this is the stuff that I control, and the impact that's going to have in moving the needle. One thing that you mentioned, Zach, you talked about compartmentalizing things, saying, well, what is my conversion rate for close on the strategy session of close, and backing it through. So you compartmentalize it. There's many reasons why that's important. We have a client, 8-figure client. When they came to us originally, they said, hey, what we need to do is we need more leads. And this is common. Almost everybody says this, right? What they're looking for is more leads. So we need more leads. So, okay. But let's take a look and let's dive a little bit deeper into the sales process. So they never really compartmentalized the whole thing. But what we ended up finding is that they had tons of leads, but only 28% of the people that agreed to go on the first call actually showed up for the first call. Only 28%. And so that's, at that point we realized that if we wanted to improve his bottom line, everything else worked well. We just got to figure out how to get that 28% a little bit higher. And once we added a follow-up sequence, we connected them with a service like we have Schedule Once, but I think they use Calendly, and there were follow-ups that went in play, took them from 28% to just north of 50%. And the revenue went through the roof. It was like one little improvement that took, maybe an hour to set the whole thing up, that improved their revenue by millions over the course of the year. Right? So that's why you want to compartmentalize things. And then through that, you're going to be able to reverse engineer to figure out, okay, what is the activity that either myself or my sales team needs to get done?
And to add to that, because Eric said that does make sense, but I'll need to take notes, keep records to know what works and what doesn't. Absolutely, right? So from our perspective, when we first started, we didn't know, how many it would take to set an appointment, to convert, etc. So each time you're doing it, I often say just kind of start small and begin to test and track, right? So we keep track. We use different softwares, CRMs and email platforms, so we know how many are sent, how many are opened, how many are respond, and then from there I can start to calculate what's working, what isn't. And then if I have 10 calls, if I know that 0 converted to the next step, well, that's a bad sign. And I would look at a few things, right? Let's not just jump to the conclusion, well, the leads are bad, right? Because I think sometimes people say that, but start to look at it different ways. Well, why is that happening? And when you become more intentional and really know what's working, what isn't, then you're in control. And then that's, I think, where people feel like this, I can do whatever I want. I can grow my business to whatever because I know I'm in control.
Do you see the difference between selling products and selling services? As in, is there a difference in the sales process per se? There's a difference in the script because when you're selling a product, that's tangible, right? People can hold it, smell it, feel it,
kick the tires.
Kick the tires, right? When you're selling a service, that's an intangible. So when you're selling a service, now what you need to do is you have to create a vision of what it's going to be like. In both cases, what you need to do is you're actually selling an emotion. People buy feelings, right? So in both cases, you're selling a feeling. But in terms of what we're talking about today and taking people through the activities, that's the same, man. Absolutely the same. It's just the activities might be a little different depending on whether or not you've got a physical location or you're doing everything over the phone.
Yeah. When I worked with Sandler, and they would put us in this room and there'd be, I don't know, 20 other people, and I was doing it remote because they were in New Hampshire and I'm in California, so I'm up at 5 a.m. in the morning doing this sales training. No better way to start your day. they would do role play, and I would role play with car salesmen. And so they had activities, and they would call it their cookbook, right? This is my cookbook that I need to hit per day to know how I'm going to sell this amount of cars. I mean, that's an extreme. They're not selling $100 product, but they knew, whatever, right? But if I were selling something smaller, I would know my cookbook or my numbers I need to hit in order to sell these $50 products or something, right? And you have to make sure it makes sense in terms of how much money you're spending on it and the ROI, but still, it's still the same.
And most of our clients, believe it or not, even though there's a bunch of software all over the place, most of our clients still track their activities on good old Google Sheets.
Oh, yeah.
You track it on Google Sheets, and you throw a little chart up there so you can see what your progress is. It's nice. It's easy. You can share it with the team. And then, you can, our clients actually report to us directly. So we hold our clients accountable and hold their feet to the fire. But you could also find ways in which within your team, have an accountability partner and team. Even if you're the CEO of the company, have somebody else in your team hold you accountable to getting this done, even if it may even be your assistant. Hold me accountable. Make sure I get this stuff done. You have somebody else accountable that you have to answer to. You absolutely are more likely going to get it done. So I know that we committed to keeping this short so everybody can get done, go back to doing what you're doing, fulfilling your activity, right? So if you have any last minute questions, feel free to throw them in here. Otherwise, we will end today's session, and we'll see you on another business training for sure. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can head over to the website at Predictable Profits and schedule a strategy session, and we'll help to answer your questions and deliver as much value as we can in the time that we have together. So there you go. All right, man.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next training session. All right. Awesome. Thank you. See ya.